everybody. Welcome to episode number 9 of the Debt Free Dad podcast. Listen, we aren't perfect, and today we're going to be sharing our financial mistakes and how we overcame them. And by doing so, we are hoping to show you that it's possible to come back from your financial setbacks and be really successful with managing your money. Stay tuned.
Welcome to the Debt Free Dad podcast, where we're helping normal, everyday people learn how to save money and kick debt so they can live a happier and stress-free life. Now here's your host, Debt Free Dad, Brad Nelson.
Hey, everybody. What is up? You can find me on Facebook, Pinterest, YouTube, and Instagram. Just search Brad Nelson, Debt Free Dad. We would love to connect with you. So, guys, today we are airing out our dirty laundry. How do you guys feel about that?
I don't know about you. I feel like I'm perfect and I've never done anything wrong. No, just kidding.
Yeah, I'm okay with it. I'm a pretty open book. I'm sure my wife will be listening to this in horror, but I'm a pretty open book with people.
Yeah, it's interesting how people are. Like, we talk about this, like, because some people who want to join our program, Roots Personal Finance, and there'll be some people that will be a little hesitant about it because they're not really quite sure about how much information that they have to share in our program. And we tell people, you don't have to share really anything in our program if you don't want to. And we have, and Amber, you're obviously a big part of Roots now, and you see the participants and the members that come through and the people that we're helping. And it's like almost a 180-degree difference. Like, you'll get some people that'll come in, they're like Ryan said, I'm an open book. Like, I'm willing to share whatever, mistakes that I've made, and obviously I am too. And I know you have been very open with them as well, but then you'll also get people in there that are just like, nope, I am way too embarrassed to be talking about some of the dumb stuff that I did with money, right? I mean, you see that.
I never talked about it until I joined the program, because then I saw that, other people are doing this stuff too. Oh, I could share what I've done as well.
Yeah. In fact, it's interesting. I just had one of our members, Rochelle Baker. She's also from Canada, and we just did a testimonial piece on her, and she filled out the questions that we had her ask, and she said one of the biggest things that the program helped her overcome was just that whole idea of, like, she thought she was the only one that was making these mistakes. And once she joined Roots, very similar to what you just said, Amber, she actually realized, like, holy smokes, there's a lot of other people out there that have made some of the kind of poor choices that I've made. And it was really eye-opening to her, and also gave her a little bit of forgiveness, I think, like, hey, it's okay that I messed this up. Like, I'm in a good place to start fixing this. And 6 months later, she's paid off $17,000. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So it's just an amazing testimonial. But so as we've kind of talked about, I've coached and worked with lots of people over the years, and many of them think, and I hear it time and time again, they are the absolute worst with money. Brad, I am the absolute worst. Like, I am a complete mess. I'm going to be your worst member, worst coaching call, whatever it might be. And believe it or not, though, a lot of us have a lot more in common when it comes to mismanaging our money. And we've all made a lot of the same types of mistakes. So in today's show, we want to share some of the stupid mistakes that we've made with money and show you that even though we've made those mistakes, all three of us have come back from those mistakes, and hopefully to offer you some support, some motivation, and to show you that you can face your challenges and you can have a better day when it comes to money and personal finance. And you don't always have to just be left with this whole mindset of this is just the way it's going to be, because it doesn't have to be. And if you can make some choices, some different habit changes, and implement the stuff that we're talking about, your financial life will improve drastically. So who wants to take the stage first?
I'm going to share a funny story. And I think in previous podcasts I've shared that I'm a sucker for salespeople. So this was back when we were still living in Wisconsin, and this guy came door to door to sell meat. Frozen meat, like steaks and chicken and sausage and all this sort of stuff. Like we were living, paycheck to paycheck, but this guy was good. And I bought $800 worth of frozen meat. And I was thinking, like, man, I am going to be set for the year. I won't have to buy anything. So it's all in the truck. He gives it all to me. And so then I'm like, where the heck am I going to put all this? So then I had to go buy a $500 freezer to put $800 worth of meat in a freezer.
Oh my gosh.
So that's a funny one that I think of. Anytime someone says, what's something dumb you've done, that's something dumb. I've also bought an alarm. I was traveling a lot for work. I bought an alarm for my wife thinking she'd love it. She came home and was like, you can call them and tell them to take that out. So if you are a door-to-door salesperson, come on over to our house. As long as I'm home, you got a good shot.
That is so funny. Honestly, I would not take you for that. I would not at all. I would think you'd be the one that's like, nah, I don't need your stuff. Right?
Well, I am now.
Yeah, right.
But back in the day, I'd fall for anything.
It's funny that you bring up the meat. First of all, was it good? Was it like good quality meat, or was it just...
It was decent. It's just after you're eating it for months on end, you're like, okay, I'm tired of this.
Yeah. I've bought some of that stuff too. So probably the same place, same truck. I didn't buy $800 worth, I'll tell you that. But I didn't really care for the quality of the meat. It was like, this doesn't seem right. Like there's something weird about this steak. Oh, that one's funny. I like that one. So one of the biggest ones that I've ever done is I have bought and leased 11 cars in 12 years. That's literally, if you think about that, 11 cars in 12 years. And I think I probably even missed them. I had on the bottom of our podcast notes, I was going through and trying to figure out which cars they were. That's how many I've had. And since I was 18, and Ryan, you probably remember that first car I bought, that little red Dodge Neon, right?
Yep.
And it started there from 18 until 30, 11 cars in 12 years, which is insanity when you think about cars. And we're gonna talk about this on an upcoming podcast on cars, the depreciation, and how detrimental they could be. Like, this was the stupidest thing I ever could have done. And not only was I buying those cars and leasing some of those cars, but then I would be so upside down in them, I would trade them in again, and they would just roll that depreciation and what I couldn't cover to pay off that loan into the next car. And soon we were paying just these crazy car payments for cars that weren't even matching what the payment should have been because of all that depreciation that was adding up. So when people come to me and say, oh, I've made some really bad decisions with cars, I'm like, oh no, you haven't heard my bad decisions with cars. But yeah, that's a crazy one. 11 cars in 12 years.
That's a lot of cars, Brad.
It is. And they weren't even like one of them, well, two of them, maybe three would have passed the cool factor. But the other ones, they were just like typical cars. Like, what was I doing? I look at that and I'm like, why was I even thinking some of that stuff? It's crazy.
We had a lot of things that were just smaller and added up, like financing random things like a computer, furniture, and 0%. You won't pay any interest until you get to the end of the loan and you haven't paid it off yet. Yeah. And you're like, oh, all this interest just accumulated and now I'm paying double for this furniture or this computer. It was crazy how much we paid for random stuff that we felt we needed at the time.
Yeah. Yeah, we call that death by 1,000 cuts. That's one of mine too, was just all of the small, dumb purchases that I made. In fact, I mean, Amber, you know this, when we do our workshop, I throw my credit card statement on there on one of the slides. Like, I have this, it was like the only credit card statement I ever kept. And it's like almost $8,700. And I tell people, it's like, I didn't even remember what that $8,700 in debt represented. Like, it was just a pile of debt for a bunch of stuff. I had no idea what I had bought with it. It's crazy.
Yeah. For us, we also consolidated a lot. We started out good. I mean, we bought our first house and we sold it. We made a good amount of money and we built a house and we put 20% down and we did the right things. But then once we did that, once we had that new house, then we were like, well, we should finish the basement, and took out a big loan to do that through home equity. That's when the mortgages, they were giving them away to anybody that could walk. I remember getting that. I remember calling them on the phone and filling the information out over the internet and basically just getting approved within a day for like $60,000. No questions asked, not even a pay stub I had to send them.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking like, well, yeah, we could totally borrow it. They let us have it. They were giving everybody money back then. And so not even a thought of should we even do this? Like, we just felt like if they're willing to loan it to us, we must be able to afford it.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. That goes to that whole mindset of looking at the financial industry as they have this higher power and they have this all knowing of who can afford what, and using that approval as a grade of how well you're doing with your finances. It's a very dangerous path to walk, because you could find yourself in a lot of debt because you're getting approved. So a couple other ones. I know one of the ones that I was always really, really ashamed for, and this is actually as I started getting out of debt and started to say, oh, I'm really going to do this time, right? I actually, sad to say, took $200, $200 out of my son's piggy bank to go to a concert that I couldn't afford to go to. Oh my God. You think about the show Debt Free Dad. I was an awful dad that day. Busted in my kid's piggy bank to go to a concert is ludicrous. It's like stupid. That's how out of line my spending was. It was bad. Now, don't get me wrong. I have paid him back since then, and a lot more so, because we do some investing and stuff for our kids very early on in their age. So he's been paid back plenty, but it's just something I always remember. It's the probably, outside of getting the loan from my grandmother to fix her upper house, that's probably the most shameful thing I've ever done. Like taking money from your kids to afford your poor spending habits. And that's why some people will be like, Brad, do you practice not being shocked when I tell you how bad I am with money? And it's like, no, I don't. I've just made a lot of the same dumb mistakes, and I don't even have to be shocked because I've been where you are and I've made all those dumb choices.
Yeah, we've taken money from our daughter. Right, but she was on our snowball.
Oh, really? Okay.
I don't even think I told you, because I was that ashamed of it.
Really? I didn't remember that. No.
Nope, I don't think I told you. But she was on our snowball. She was one of the first one we paid off. But very ashamed of that. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's a lot of people in our Facebook group, we'll see people post about that. We'll ask people, what's the one debt you can't wait to unload and get rid of? And there's quite a few mentions of people, loans from my parents or loans from my brother and sister, loans from family members, because it changes that relationship a lot, especially if the other person isn't too pleased that you're not paying them back.
Especially when we were telling her she had just got a job. We're like, you need to save this money. You need to save it, put some money away. Well, then we go and borrow that money.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Ouch, right?
It's like hypocrites right here.
Yeah. Oh, right. Yep. Can you walk the walk? You're talking the talk, but can you walk the walk, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the other ones that I had is similar to what Ryan said. When it comes to refinancing, we talk about a lot that, should I refinance my debt? Should I, do a consolidation? Should I move it to 0%? We actually had a whole podcast on that just recently. And I actually did that. I refinanced my house. It was the first house that I owned. The market was going up, so we had some equity in it. But I also had a lot of debt. And couple of the things that we refinanced was credit card debt. And I refinanced my leased car into my mortgage. It's just stupid. And guess what happened? It didn't fix anything. The first couple months it was great. Oh, we have all this extra money. And then what ended up happening? We went out and got more payments because we said, you know what? We can afford those payments. And we added on even more debt to the situation. Just, again, going back to those habits and choices. If you don't change those, nothing's going to change. Nothing.
Yeah, we did something very similar. When we sold that first house, we took some of the proceeds and paid off a car, and some of that we're thinking this makes financial sense because then we can do the right thing. And we moved into that new house, and no sooner did we move in, we're like, well, we need a new car now. So then we took money we made on a house, paid it off just to go buy another car, and then have debt all back over again. Just for, I don't know.
Yep.
I have no excuses.
Yeah, just stupidity. And yeah, it is. It absolutely is. So there's a couple of our big, huge kind of whammies that we've had that's definitely hurt our finances in the past. So what we want to do is when we come back from the break, we're going to talk about how do we come back from this, and what are some tips from you to overcome some of the past financial mistakes that you have made. Just stay tuned. Hey, if you love planners, this is for you. Do you know why planners frustrate me, though? Because they only get it half right. Now, sure, they're really fancy at helping you manage your time, which is really important, obviously, but where they get it wrong is money. Now, I believe that there are two important resources that you need to have control of in your life to have success. One is time, and the other one is your money. And most planners don't include any financial planning, and that's frustrating. Things like keeping track of paydays and when bills are due, spending habits, yearly expenses, budgets, cash flow planning, debt elimination plans, goal planning. These things are a real pain in the butt because then you have to create your own. And who has time for all that? So instead, what happens for most of us? Nothing. We tend to ignore our finances even more, and things only get worse. Well, that can all end today. I am so excited to announce the release of my brand new, totally awesome debt freedom planner here this year. Now, before you say, Brad, I already have a planner. Now, I'm going to here to tell you that this is not an ordinary day planner. This Debt Freedom Planner is a companion tool that works with your day planner to help you save more money, pay off debt, and melt away financial stress. This is the tool that we've all been waiting for. Also, if you're not a paper person, maybe you love spreadsheets or electronic versions, we've got a digital version available to you as well. So head on over to the realdebtfreedad.com, click on the Debt Freedom Planner in the menu at the top of the page, get all those details, and order your very own Debt Freedom Planner today. Hey everybody, welcome back to today's show. So today we are sharing how to overcome your past financial mistakes. And we started off the first half of the show talking about some of the big financial mistakes that we have made. And the point of today's show is to show you that, one, more than likely, you're pretty normal. And you have a lot in common with a lot of people that are around you. They're just not talking about it. But we're obviously talking about it on this show. And we're revealing that, again, 78% of people are living paycheck to paycheck. A lot of us have made a lot of the same bad choices when it comes to our money. So, guys, can we share some tips on what were some things that you guys started doing? I know we've talked about some of these topics already here on this podcast, but what helped you overcome these financial mistakes the most, do you think?
We really had to do some soul searching and really figure out why we wanted to get out of debt. I think, all the other stuff, the paying off the debt, yes, that's hard, but for us, we tried to do it a lot of times without having a good why and a reason behind it. So, my tip and the thing that helped us the most is having your why behind you want to do this. And it can't be, well, just so I can not have debt. You got to have some solid reasons why you're trying to accomplish this. Imagining what your life would be like if you don't have it. It takes a while to do that. You're not going to do it in a day or a week, maybe even a month. It's going to take time to sit down with you, or if you're married or have a partner, you need to really sit down and explore that. And that's, to me, probably the biggest tip I can give. I think the word why is a word that is, as a kid, I remember when my kids would, and if you have kids, they would ask why all the time. And a lot of times you would just get to the point where like, just because I said so, and as you grow up, and I just remember growing up in school, teachers would just be like, just because that's the way it is. And anytime you ask why, or you might go to work and ask why, and if your boss says it's because that's the way it's done. And so we don't spend enough time figuring that stuff out, I think. We don't spend enough time on ourselves exploring the why, because our whole lives, I feel like we've been told that it's just because it is the way it is. So just do it. Just go in debt because that's the way it is. Don't worry about why you want to get out of debt. Nobody does that. So for me, that is really the biggest thing that's helped us.
That is a great example. Like one of the things, like when I used to work in the sign industry before I started this business, and we would always start our new employees that were CSRs, customer service, inside sales reps. We would always start their training in the production area of the sign shop. And the reason is to answer the question that Ryan just talked about, why? Because if we gave them, we found out and we discovered earlier on, if we gave them experience in the back and showed them the reasons why the orders and why all the information needs to come back the way that it does, we found that those CSRs and inside sales reps, if they were good and they wanted to participate in the team, we found that they were more successful in their job because they understood why they were doing what they were doing, as opposed to just being told what to do. And it is a great example of with your personal finances. If you can determine that why, you'll be able to overcome any financial mistake that you have made. And I've seen people overcome daunting financial messes. And a big reason why they were able to is because they've established that why and what they wanted that future life to look like. And it gave them a purpose to start doing the stuff that we're talking about here.
I mean, I would agree with the why and having some kind of purpose because you need something to look forward to. But for us, a lot of it came down to just small behavior changes and talking to each other and communicating with each other and knowing that we wanted more. So we had to make the changes we needed to, even as small as they felt at the time. Like, oh, it's not going to make a difference if I have a coffee every day. We had to make those changes and realize that they were going to make a huge difference for the long run.
Yeah.
So for us, it was a lot of those behavior changes, but we definitely had a why.
Yeah. The other thing, and we've kind of let the cat out of the bag on a few of these tips, just kind of talking through some of this stuff here through today's podcast, but you also understand that you are not alone. And by saying that, and I'm going to combine another tip that we've got here today that we're going to share with you is you need to go out and find a group of people, a support and accountability program, Facebook group, people in your local area, and people that are open to talking about this personal finance stuff and looking to improve. And I think if you do, you're going to feel a lot better about your past because you're going to realize, again, that you're not the only one who has made those decisions. You're not the only one who has made those poor mistakes. And again, you talk about, one of the mistakes that I made about stealing that money from my son's piggy bank to go to that concert. I mean, I felt miserable about that. But once I started kind of finding out that other people were doing it too, and it's like, oh, okay, well, maybe I'm not such the awful person that I made myself out to be. So, again, understanding that you're not alone and finding that support and accountability, I think, is going to take you a long way. And it's one of the reasons why our business now exists is, it's one of the reasons why we opened up Roots of Personal Finance is to give people that environment to correct their situation and give them a positive environment where like-minded people are working their way out of debt, having that camaraderie and having that support system there. It can go a long way for you. So again, I'm not saying it's got to be Roots, but it's got to be something. You've got to find something for you that's going to help you push through some of those mistakes.
Big thing that I learned is the way you find those people. Because a lot of people will be like, well, how do you find those people? I mean, nobody talks about this stuff. I think personal finance in the world we live in today is just one of those taboo subjects still that I hope that this podcast makes is one of my goals with this is that we need to make it okay to talk about.
Yeah.
We need to make it okay to raise your hand and say, hey, I'm not good with money and I want to get better at it. People don't do that enough. And I think the biggest way you can do that is just owning it. I remember being in a church group and owning I forget even what the subject was, but it came up and I remember we just owned it in that among other people. And you could just feel like it was the most awkward feeling because everyone was like, oh, I can't believe they just said that. But when we owned it, man, I mean, that's when we started finding people. People would come to us and, oh, we're struggling with that too. So I can say if you're trying to find someone out there to help you or you're looking for people, there's probably people that are also looking for that same thing. And if you're brave enough to raise your hand and say, hey, I'm looking for help on this, you might find a support group within people you already know.
Yeah, completely agree. I mean, again, that's why we're here is because that same thing happened to us too. I mean, it's like when we got out of debt and we started sharing our story about it, people just started kind of almost coming out of the woodwork and saying, hey, how did you guys do it? Like, can you help us? Like, we're struggling with credit cards. And that's where I started as like, hey, maybe I could, I'm enjoying this. I like the topic. I like how it's changed our lives. Maybe we could do this as a business. And it's completely transformed our lives just by having that open discussion and that conversation. So the other thing I would recommend too is you've got to get started. And I think this is the biggest thing this is the biggest place where most people fail is that we live in this, and again, if you're in the self-development world, obviously you're listening to a podcast that's helping you develop and become a better person at your finances. There's a lot of people out there who are they want to learn as much as they can. There's not enough people that are willing to take action and actually put to work what they're learning. And I think that's the big difference in Roots, where we see people who have amazing results and some people who don't really get many results at all, is that there's people who learn and then take tons and massive action in order to make those results happen in their life. So after listening to this podcast today and any of the podcasts that we're putting out there or anything that you're doing to improve your personal finances, maybe it's reading a book, pick something and start doing it. And by taking action and getting those little wins along the way, you're going to start to change this negative momentum that you have in your life when it comes to your finances and starting to turn it into positive momentum. And Ryan, one of the stories, I don't think I've ever shared this with you on any of our shows here yet, but one of the stories I used when we were kids, our older brother had he had a different mom than us, and his mom had a pool at their house. And I remember going over to that pool, and as kids, we would try to create a whirlpool in that pool, and we would race around in one direction, trying to get the water going in one direction, and then we would have fun and try to stop and then turn and go in the other direction. And that water would push you backwards because you've created this momentum in that one direction. Well, it's the same thing that's happening with your personal finances. The hard part is when you decide to turn around and start walking towards the momentum that you've carried or that you've created over the years of these negative decisions and these bad decisions. By not taking action and maybe not getting a quick win right away, it can cause you to quit and give up. So you really have got to find what are some small, measurable steps, things that I can start working on right now that are going to help me get some of those easy wins. So that way you can start taking that negative momentum that you've created in your life and start changing the direction of where you're going.
It's hard. I mean, I'm not going to sugarcoat it and be like, well, once you start doing all that, then it's just easy. I mean, it is hard, but I've learned it's supposed to be hard. And I think it just has to be. If it was easy, if tomorrow morning you woke up and could just, all your debt would be gone, I could probably guarantee you a lot of people in 10 years would be listening to this podcast again, wondering how to get out of debt. Because if it's not hard, it doesn't fix what's wrong. It doesn't fix what's broken. It's going through that whole process is what will help kind of solidify you going forward the rest of your life to say, yeah, I'm never going back there.
Hey, what's this I see? I thought this was a party! Let's dance!
All right, so Kevin Bacon means it's time to do some celebrations of the show, and today we've got a little bit more of a theme. We were talking about, some steps in this podcast of what you could get started with first. We obviously always think an emergency fund is a great place to get started, and today we've got about half a dozen or so people that are celebrating the building of their emergency fund. So no better way than to encourage you to get started with that small goal. And again, just to get started, make a goal. $500, $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, whatever you feel comfortable with, and get started on that emergency fund savings. So the first one we have today is Rochelle Baker. And we were talking about Rochelle earlier, and actually she's working on rebuilding that emergency fund. But again, in the last 6 months, taking action has paid off $17,000 in debt as well. But they have added another $100 to their emergency fund savings. So good for Rochelle.
Sandra Simmons, I just rebuilt it to $1,000 today.
Heck yeah, good for you, Sandra. Awesome.
Lori McAllister is up to $275.
That's awesome. Congratulations to Lori.
Cassandra Lawrence says, I have just continued to add to it. We have almost $2,000 in it, and I plan to get the amount by the end of the month.
Heck yeah, way to go. By the way, sorry about that, Amber. I realized that was my turn and I didn't go.
So it's okay.
And then lastly, we've got Jill Flickinger Brown, added $200 to her emergency fund last week. So congratulations to you, Jill. So again, small steps, $100 here, $50 there. But again, these are the little things. These are those little wins that we're talking about that can make those big mistakes kind of go away over time. Hey, that sound means it's time for the question of the show. So do you have a question about your finances? If so, send our podcast an email at brad@therealdebtfreedad.com, and we'll be happy to take your question and answer it on an upcoming episode of our podcast. So today's question is a budgeting question, and I'm sure there's probably some other people out there that are struggling with this as well. This person says, I get paid bi-weekly. Will a monthly budget work for me? I'm having a hard time with it because of how the paydays land. Do you have any tips to help me out? And I got to tell you, for those people who get paid bi-weekly, this is a common challenge that we find with a lot of people, because depending on where those paydays land, and especially because you'll have those 2 times during the year on a certain month where you'll actually have 3 paydays. And it can be a little challenging about how to organize and, say where's that cash flow go? Because you're going to have some paydays that are going to overlap with the next month. And it's like, how much does that cash flow have to cover the bills of the beginning of the next month? It can be very daunting, and it can cause a lot of confusion. I've seen people where they've missed payments because they didn't plan right. So I think one of the best things that you can do is, when we say monthly budget, just don't take that literally when it comes to having a biweekly paycheck. I think one of the best things that you can do is have a budget for each paycheck. So instead of budgeting out your whole month, it's okay to look at it as a monthly thing. But I would say create a budget where you have your first paycheck and then you have your second paycheck of the month. And that way you're budgeting just that money that's coming in for that pay period. You can do it all on the same budget sheet. Just write, you're going to have 2 columns on your budget sheet. The left one, obviously, the left column would be your first paycheck. The right column is going to be the second paycheck. And then just figure out, of those paydays, which bills am I going to cover with that? We found that people that have taken that approach, as opposed to trying to cover it just on one budget, have had a lot more luck in organizing their money, especially when, again, you have that those rare occurrences, that those 2 times a year where you have those 3 pay periods. Those we probably have found that people have probably had the most struggles with when it comes to managing that biweekly paycheck.
Yeah, we've been paid biweekly as well for years. So one of the things we also discovered when we started getting out of debt is we were heavily like a lot of our bills were coming in at one time of the month rather than the other. So we talked to a lot of different creditors and banks and worked out, just, you're not calling them to say, hey, we're not going to make the payment. You're just calling to say, hey, I'd like to move my payment so that it's a little bit more evenly dispersed throughout the month. So you're not having one whole check consumed by all your bills. And that helped us out a ton, because we were struggling with the same thing. It was like, how do we do this? Because all of a sudden your money's gone and now you've got to, so I would suggest, if you can, just if you're struggling with a lot of bills in one half of the month, see if you can spread those out.
Yep. And that's just, quick phone call. Absolutely.
Yeah, we've done the same thing as Ryan. But for us, we always had a calendar, and I had a desk calendar, and I still do this today, where I just have what days we get paid, what our bills are. So I could see we get paid this Friday. I know, okay, we have to pay these bills through this paycheck, because I could see them that they're due before the next pay. So that's what we do. And it just gives us a better visual. But we still do the budget as a monthly whole. We just kind of disperse it based on our calendar.
Yeah. Yeah. The calendar system is a cool feature. In fact, we have it included in our totally awesome debt freedom planner now, where, again, I think, Amber, you use the right word, visual, and you can kind of see what Ryan was talking about. The two of them is, you can see if there's a bottleneck going on visually right on the calendar. Like, holy smokes, we got way too much coming out on just this one day. And on a budget form, you may not be able to see that, because on a budget form, you're not necessarily always looking at a budget on a calendar. Whereas opposed to if you move all of those paydays to a calendar and now you see when everything's actually moving, you can start to predict where those bottlenecks are going to be. So great question. So thanks for hanging out with us today, everybody. We love your feedback, and it also helps us grow our podcast. So please leave us an honest review in Apple Podcasts. We read every single one of them. And as you know, the Debt Free Dad podcast is here to help you live a happier and stress-free financial life. So if you know someone that could benefit from our show, please give us a share. We would appreciate you doing that. And we also appreciate you for listening in, and we'll see all of you in our upcoming episode.
Thanks for listening to the Debt Free Dad podcast. For more free resources to kick debt and financial stress, head over to therealdebtfreedad.com.